Dragon cargo mission. Now, so far, we've reflown 214 first stages, and that includes Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. If successful, it will mark the 243rd recovery of an orbital class rocket.
Let's roll.
As the clock approaches T0, let's head over to NASA's Steve Seifaloff at Cape Canaveral to talk about today's weather. Steve, how's it going over there?
What up, Steve?
Well, the weather is terrific, Jesse. 100% go. In the words of Launch Weather Officer Melody Lovin, it's as good as it gets. And with that, welcome inside Hangar AE here at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, just a couple miles down from Launch Complex 39A.
Full house.
From here, we're going to monitor the launch team as they take us through tonight's countdown. So far, the nets have been relatively quiet, which is a good sign. The vehicle is healthy. The team's not working any issues. The teams performed a hot fire test just a couple days ago to prove the rocket was ready.
I can't.
The
This
brief
guy,
engine
Captain,
fire
it's
in
out of my
about
control.
a second is a routine test that allows the turbo pumps and engine machinery of the Falcon 9 first stage to spin up long enough for engineers to evaluate the system.
Yes.
After that evaluation, the NASA and SpaceX teams yesterday cleared the rocket and spacecraft for launch today. The 45th Space Wing says the eastern range is green, and that means our path from here to the International Space Station is clear and safe. Again, the weather tonight is terrific. 100% go. Still, the Launch Weather Officer Melody Lovin will be monitoring the clouds for potential violations. There is a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind from the ocean, but that's not nearly enough to affect the rocket as it climbs through the atmosphere and into orbit. After its work is done, the first stage will come back here to land at landing zone 1, about a mile or so away.
Stellar.
That is different.
What's up, dude? I'll be right back. Let me go see if it's cloudy out.
That saw the first stage land offshore on a drone show. And to save you a Google search, the first cargo mission to see the first stage return to land was CRS-9 back in 2016. Right now, SpaceX is fueling the Falcon 9 with RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene, and super cold liquid oxygen. That is minus 297 degrees, and it is also being loaded into the first stage and second stage. And it's that liquid oxygen turning into a gas and venting into the air that is producing the white clouds you see around the rocket. All rockets are designed with valves that open to allow the oxygen to boil off to maintain the right pressure in the tanks. Those clouds form when the oxygen makes contact with Florida's humid air. Our launch time tonight is 8:28 and 14 seconds, and the launch window is instantaneous to put the spacecraft on course to dock with the International Space Station on Saturday, November 11th at 5:20 a.m. Eastern Time. For more on that, let's head over to Chelsea Bayarte inside NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston.
Very foggy.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome to the International Space Station's Flight Control Room here inside Mission Control. I'm Chelsea Bayarte, live in NASA's Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. Teams of flight controllers are behind me monitoring tonight's launch with Flight Director Garrett Henn at the helm. Mission Control is go for launch, meaning the space station is ready to receive the spacecraft, and we're not tracking any issues that would prevent a docking.
Cool. So what's the difference from Dragon Crew 1 to Dragon Crew 2? There was no Crew 1 Dragon, Little Joe. It was a resupply vehicle. That's the crew that's up on the ISS right now. They're from all over the place. US, Russia, Japan, and Europe. Anyway. Why did they use super cold oxygen? I'll tell you in a second, Eddie. So, Joe, Dragon 1 was a cargo resupply vehicle only. Dragon 2 is a new architecture where they have one chassis of capsule that they can make for a resupply vessel, which is what you see here. This is going up to the ISS to bring them food and water and stuff, and science experiments. Or adapt it for the crew version, which is, yeah, there is a flight interface there. That's the Dragon pressurization systems. Actually, capsule pressurization systems, rocket guy, hydrazine fueling. The helium tanks, the helium pressure tanks, and the bladders are on that interface there. I can explain what that is in a second if you guys really want to know. I'm not just making this stuff up. There's the vent right there. So yeah, Dragon 1 was used for resupply. Dragon 2 is a modular thing. They can make them either one, like on the assembly line. They can make it crew or make it for cargo. It's to standardize operations. Now, what's going on right there is you see Falcon 9's transporter erector TE ripping a fat vape cloud. What that is a TE purge down. So, Eddie, you asked why they're using liquid oxygen. They use liquid oxygen because, well, it's there's no oxygen up in space. You need oxygen for combustion. That's really important. If you don't, you're going to take something up in the vacuum and your rocket engine will flame out like a jet motor or something, like a jet engine. So they bring the oxidizer with them. It's easier to carry the oxidizer as a liquid. Oxygen, you can make it into a liquid. You have to freeze it, though. It has to be like minus 190 C or something. It's really, really cold, and I always forget the number for some weird reason, but it's all right. It has to be super freaking cold. So, long story short, why is the oxidizer cold? Because that's where oxygen turns into a liquid at an extremely cold temperature. So, inside of the rocket fuel tanks, there's two fuel tanks technically inside of the first and second stage on Falcon 9. There's a liquid oxygen tank on top and an RP1 tank or kerosene tank below it on the first and second stage. You'll see when the vehicle's filled up that ice will be coming off like kind of half of the first stage and half of the second stage, right? So, how does that pertain to that vape cloud that was coming off of the transporter erector there? Well, oxygen, if you flow oxygen through, which is really freaking cold, if you flow it through a pipe on a launch pad in Florida, which I don't know if you guys know, it's pretty hot in Florida, your liquid oxygen will start to evaporate. It'll boil. It'll start to evaporate. Like if you put water at 212 Fahrenheit on the stove or 100 centigrade on the stove, it'll boil. The oxygen will boil at a much lower temperature. So that liquid oxygen, the second they put it into the line, it's going to turn into gas. And gaseous oxygen is not good for the rocket. The rocket engines on Falcon 9 are liquid fuel and liquid oxidizer engines, and if you put anything but those two things in the engine, it does bad things to it. Like pouring water in a car's intake. Don't want to do that. That's bad. So, VAB action right there. So, what they're doing is they're slow filling the line up, the oxidizer line that goes up the transporter erector and into the second stage liquid oxygen tank. They're slowly filling it up, but there's a vent valve that's open at the top, and that oxidizer that's going up during slow fill right there is evaporating. It's turning to gas, but instead of putting the gas into the second stage, they shoot it out the side. It's called a TE purge down. Once the oxidizer line that goes up the stage into the second stage is fully saturated with liquid oxygen, they'll shut the vent line and they'll open the lines to the second stage and they'll start flowing it in. That's when you can initiate what's called a LOX fast fill. There's the Deluge system on the SLS mobile launcher. They changed it, the pad suppression system. That's why they're showing waterfalls. Because the first launch broke the launch pad pretty hard. That's for SLS, though. That's not Falcon 9. Different rocket. The SLS is bigger than Falcon 9. Like, way bigger. You spray a lot of water on the pad. So, that cloud was to basically evac the oxidizer line up the pad that goes up the side of the transporter erector so they could start fueling the second stage with fuel and liquid oxygen. Yeah, also do not hump. Do not hump. Yeah, that was a little bit of a long explanation, but that's good enough. Hey. And then, like, about a minute before launch, you'll see what they'll do is they'll pump helium, or well, actually, it wouldn't be helium, it'd be nitrogen. They'll pump nitrogen up the oxidizer line and close the valve to the second stage and open the vent valve. And the nitrogen gas will displace the gaseous oxygen that's inside it, and the gaseous oxygen will shoot out the side. They use it to chill down the line, and then they use it to purge. They purge the line out. Why? Well, you don't want rocket fuel inside of your rocket, inside of the launch pad when your rocket goes off. You want rocket fuel in the oxidizer inside of your rocket, not the pad. So they evac all the propellant so the pad doesn't catch on fire. Rocket fuel is very flammable. Oxidizer makes anything super flammable, so gotta be careful. I'm gonna shut up. They're talking about Starship.
Numerous lessons learned that directly contributed to several upgrades to both the vehicle and ground infrastructure to improve the probability of success on future flights. Our second flight test could launch as soon as mid-November, pending regulatory approval, which is just around the corner. This next test will debut a hot stage separation system and a new electronic thrust vector control, or TVC system, for Super Heavy Raptor engines, in addition to reinforcements to the pad foundation and a water-cooled steel flame deflector, among many other enhancements. Building bases or even cities on Mars will require huge amounts of cargo and eventually crew. So we're designing Starship from the beginning to carry hundreds of tons of cargo into space and be able to refuel in orbit. Before Mars, Starship will play a key role in the exploration of the moon. We're providing the lunar lander, which will return astronauts to the lunar surface for the first time in more than 50 years under NASA's Artemis missions. With the ability to deliver cargo and people to the lunar surface, we'll be ready to help humanity build a sustainable presence on the moon and learn how to live off-world before the next steps to Mars. Today, however, we are going a little closer to home with our Dragon spacecraft, where all of our learning on human space transportation began. And all the work and advancement we continue to make with Dragon in low Earth orbit will continue to pave the way for our future deep space missions with Starship. And now I'll turn it back to Jasmine at KSC to take a look at one of the payloads flying on today's mission. Jasmine?
Thanks so much, Jesse. Yes, on today's mission, we are launching seeds from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And here to tell us more about the Growing Hope Initiative is Jacqueline Putman. Thank you so much for being here, Jackie.
Halito and Chachakama, Jasmine. It's very nice to be here. My name is Jacqueline Harjo Putman. I am the coordinator for Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. This is National Heritage Month, so this is Native American Month, so this is a very important month for us. We're setting up our traditional seeds in this. We're very, very excited about this. These are seeds that came down the Trail of Tears. These are seeds that were sown in the hems of our ancestors' garments, so they knew when they left Mississippi that they would have to have food to start over. So they had the forethought, and they would have never dreamed where we're going today.
Right, Jacqueline, there's a lot of emotional significance to these seeds.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us about, you guys are going to plant them at Jones Elementary. How are these going to inspire the next generation?
Oh, this is exciting. When they come back, what we're going to do is take them to Jones Academy. It's a Native American school that we have. And they're going to plant them. We're going to do the STEM program. We're going to do a side-by-side testing for what has been on Earth, what's gone out of space, do a comparison. We're getting these kids excited about science. We want to get new astronauts. We want them to know they have a future.
I did, caveman, yeah.
That this is something that they can do. This is not out of range.
Right.
That this is something that they can have as well.
Exactly. Jacqueline, we actually showed some pictures on screen of the different things that are going to be planted. What seeds, what kind of seeds are you sending?
We're sending our traditional Tanchi flower corn. It can grow up to 20 feet tall. We've grown it to 18.5 feet. This is what we grind up and make our banaha bread. Mm-hmm. We're sending our Choctaw sweet potato squash. It can last on the shelf up to a year, tying manganese, magnesium, zinc, vitamin A, and iron. And this is hoping foods that will hold the astronauts will hopefully take and grow themselves because they last. They're good for you. So and then we have our Tanchi. We have our
what's some of that? Potato squash sounds good to me,
Smith
man.
Peas. We have Chukvi peas. These are just really prolific peas that do really well indoors, outdoors, and they're high in iron, and they're really prolific. So we're really hoping that they'll put these to use because
that is
all
awesome.
we're saying.
Jackie, how are you going to incorporate
give
this
peas
into
a
the STEM
chance.
curriculum?
Actually, what we're doing is we're building a new garden. We've been talking about building a brand new garden over at Jones Academy for this program so we could have extra produce for the kids to study and get them interested in this program so that can lead to college educations, to NASA.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Who could ever believe
sweet peas and potato squash?
Right.
And we're
corn?
kicking off Native American Month, so we're very
Sounds good to me.
and very honored.
That is fabulous. Very poignant.
You'll
very
stick the
exciting.
steak?
Thank you so much,
No,
Jackie
you
Putman.
have that
So
with the
this
steak,
science
dude.
And all the science launching today is made possible by the International Space Station, which celebrates 25
Can you stop the
years
puns?
of operation this
No.
month. Here's a look at some of the
I
highlights
don't think
from
I
the past
corn.
few decades on the orbiting
I mean, Will.
laboratory.
The ISS is the most incredible wonder of...
Did you really say give peas a chance? Carl. Yeah, Carl, I did. Where are you going? No, come back. Think he's gonna come back? Well, win some, lose some.
To learn more about the space station turning 25, keep an eye on NASA's social media channels for a video series debuting this Monday, November 13th. The space station truly is a wonder. It is the third brightest.
Humble, they keep trying to turn plants into something that tastes like meat, but cows have been doing that for years. Mother of God, you're right. Huh. How do they do haircuts on the ISS? You ever seen Wayne's World, John? The suck cut? The suck cut is a revolution in home haircutting. Wow, what a totally amazing, excellent discovery. Yeah, that's how they do that.
Space manufacturing
It certainly does suck.
CRS-29 is expected to dock to the space station this Saturday. That's November 11th at 5:20 a.m. And NASA astronauts Jasmine Montbelly and Laurel O'Hara will be monitoring the operation to ensure all this cargo is delivered safely. All right, we're marching towards launch at T-minus 7 minutes and counting for liftoff of CRS-29. So let's bring back Steve here on Florida's Space Coast.
Dan, I have
proof. Live at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, to walk us through the final moments of countdown and liftoff. Take it away.
Steve.
Thank you, Jasmine. It is just under
Steve.
7.5 minutes until launch, and the SpaceX team is working no significant issues, and the vehicle is healthy. Weather is 100% go for T0, and the range is ready to support today's mission.
All right, take a look. See, there's the liquid oxygen tank right there. It's about 2/3 of the first stage. I said half, but it's about 2/3 because of your liquid fuel to oxidizer ratio with kerosene and liquid oxygen. You get about 2/3 of the each stage being liquid oxygen tank, and about 1/3 of each stage now being liquid fuel or RP1. Now keep in mind, the first stage has 9 engines, so the fuel and oxidizer tanks on that first stage, because it's feeding 9 engines, need to be a little bit bigger than the second stage, which is feeding 1 engine. Interesting thing. First stage is what gets you up there. Second stage is what gets you going fast. You need to be going about 17,500 miles an hour, or about, 27,000 kilometers an hour, I think. Might be that. Anyway, you need to be going fast. The second stage is designed to make you go fast. But the second stage doesn't have to power against the atmosphere, and it doesn't have to power against gravity as much as the first stage. That's why the second stage ends up being a lot smaller. The other thing is that the second stage only has 1 engine, and it's a lot smaller because all it's moving is the Dragon capsule because it separates. It's called staging, when the vehicle's first stage and second stage will separate from each other. Now, because the second stage only has to push the Dragon capsule, right? And the first stage has to push the second stage and the Dragon capsule, and overcome gravity and overcome aerodynamics. First stages tend to have more engines, and they tend to be bigger. Like way bigger.
Discovery.
Oh, there you go, Zonku. Nice. Have you run the ads yet? Oh, yeah. I run ads so people don't get pre-roll ads during the launch, guys, so we're gonna run it real quick. Base, what's going on?
Erector, which is that large trusted structure that you see on your screen next to the vehicle, that will begin to attract away from the vehicle. The transporter erector, the TE, is used for vehicle rollout and to route.
Obi and friend of monkeys. Okay, Dragon switch to internal power, meaning that it's cut off from the power grid.
Electrical power to the vehicle in preparation for launch. Now, once the clamp arms are fully opened, that'll allow some room for that TE to be able to move back from the vehicle. In these last few minutes before T0, Falcon 9 is performing final health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight.
Yeah, I wonder
We
what
may
that's
hear
about.
call-outs that engines are sufficiently chilled as we get
Okay, watch the claws.
as we
The
will
claws
get a
will
little
open.
closer to liftoff, and then
So the strong back right here, or transporter erector, is designed. They build the rocket on it. The whole thing can move horizontally, and when it moves horizontally, it's on railroad tracks that go down to the hangar over there, right? So when they go to, it's called the transporter erector. Nice. It's called the transporter erector because they build the rocket on it inside of the hangar, and then they roll it and turn it upright. When they let it go after it's turned upright, they'll open up the claw right there, and the strong back will actually move back just a smidge. When the rocket goes to launch, it'll pull away. Now, why? Why not just put the thing upright and then let it go? Well, Falcon 9 really can't stand up very well unless it's fully fueled. Rockets use residual fuel pressure and oxidizer pressure inside of the tanks for structural rigidity. They use the pressurized tanks to actually maintain structure. If you think about a can, like a can of soda or a can of pop if you're from the Midwest, right? When it's closed, you can stand on that thing. But if you open it, like when you say you enjoy your nice cold snack or beverage, right? You drink the whole thing, you throw it away, you could step on the can and crush it really, really, really easily. Rockets are the same way. Now, don't try to step on that. It's bigger than you. The rockets work exactly the same way. But the rockets never depressurize the tanks on the way up. They use what's called ullage. They pump helium into the tanks as the fuel drains out because you can't vent. You can't vent the tank like you can open up a can of soda because there's nothing to vent to. It's kind of sus, I know. So the rocket relies on residual pressure inside of the tanks to stay strong. The whole key here is to make the rocket as light or as low mass as possible. Because the way rockets work, in plain English, is the less rocket that you have on your rocket and the more fuel and oxidizer you have on your rocket, the further you go. The engineering constraints for this to get that freaking thing into space are so... The rockets are so... the tolerances on the rocket are so tight that the rockets use residual pressure to basically stand up straight.
Use the thrust nozzle on the second stage slightly to make sure the guidance software and hardware is ready for flight. SpaceX does the
120
exact
seconds
same
out.
test on the first stage engines just seconds before ignition.
Solid hydrogen dark
Stage
matter is
2,
really,
launch
really
complete.
difficult. There's only a very nominal, like short nominal window in which hydrogen exists as a solid, and it's probably like 2 to 3 Kelvin, which is nothing. It's hard to do. It would be hard to use as a solid rocket fuel, but it's theoretically possible. Fusion is theoretically possible too, but here we are. Now, we're getting better at that, but let's watch the rocket launch. Okay, so there's the vent right there. What they're doing is pumping nitrogen up the fuel and oxidizer lines, or mostly the oxidizer line here, to get the gaseous oxygen away from the vehicle so the rocket's launch pad doesn't catch on fire. You want the rocket to catch on fire on the bottom, not the pad. That's bad for it. Over there, you see the water tower there. They're going to spray the pad down with water, and that water shooting off the side here indicates that that water tower is full, and meaning the system is ready to go. It uses Archimedes' principle. They open up the valve, all the water shoots down the water tower because of gravity and shoots onto the pad. That's done for acoustic suppression because the sound from the rocket can reverberate off the ground and damage the vehicle on the way up. It's happened before. You don't want that to happen. Some of this stuff is kind of delicate. T-minus 40 seconds.
SpaceX launch director verifying we are go for launch this evening. Liftoff scheduled for 8:28 p.m. Eastern Time in 14 seconds. At launch, the International Space Station will be flying 259 miles over the Arabian Sea near the coast of
20
Oman.
seconds.
We are 15 seconds to launch and counting.
15 seconds and counting.
15. T-minus 10. Sound suppression system is turning on.
T-minus
5.
5, 4, 3, 2,
Engine ignition.
1. Ignition. Liftoff.
Okay. Got a good ignition, good liftoff. Sound suppression system's at full
And
power.
liftoff of CRS-29 carrying cargo, research,
Full
and a laser,
pitching downrange.
SpaceX 29
and
is
a
in the
laser
air.
communication.
Engine pressure is nominal.
Moving
Laser
cargo.
communications demonstrator to the
to the
International
ISS.
Space Station now
Yeah,
in its
just said that,
25th
Steve.
year
Damn.
of orbital operations.
Okay. 30 seconds in. That looks good to me. Kind of hard to see the rocket, though. You can see the flames, though. I don't know if you squint. You look really close. The next call in the flight here should be power and telemetry.
Power and telemetry.
See? Told you.
At T plus 40 seconds, Falcon 9 has
Photo.
successfully lifted off from historic launch complex
It is a North Track, John.
39A in Florida. We are now coming up on max Q in just about 15 seconds or so. That is the
Falcon
point
9
of
is
maximum
supersonic.
aerodynamic. That's the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will go through during its flight.
Supersonic in 60 seconds. It's got a lot of power. Elon
Max
Musk
Q.
doesn't play Kerbal Space Program, Biff. He plays HSP.
Great
He
call
plays
out
Human
there. We
Space
have
Program.
passed through max Q.
You're right. It's real life
Now,
KSP.
with
That's just
that,
called HSP,
we have
dude.
5 events coming up that will be back to back. First will be main engine cutoff. Main engine is that what you see on your screen.
90
Those 9
seconds, T
Merlin
plus 90
engines
seconds.
are lit up right
You
now.
should hear the
but we
call
will
for
have
M1D
MECO,
chill.
which is main engine cutoff.
Or
And
M1
that's where
back
we'll
chill.
shut down all of those engines that you see there on your screen. That'll slow the vehicle down in preparation for the next
Ooh,
event
that's
called
nice.
stage separation,
pretty.
which is where the first and second stages will separate from each other. Then the first stage will perform a flip to head
Nice
back
track,
to our
dude.
launch site for landing.
Come on,
While the
adjust
second
the
stage
focus.
continues
Just a little
to
bit.
light its Merlin vacuum engine to
Come on.
boost Dragon to low Earth orbit during SES 1
Ah,
or
there
second
we go.
stage start 1. And the
No,
last
no,
event
come
will
back.
be the first stage, starting up its 1 minute long boost back burn. Again, those events are coming up here in a few seconds. Main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, second stage engine start, and the boost back burn for that first stage vehicle.
Engine cutoff.
Mika.
Stage separation.
Stage separation confirmed.
A little bit of a delay on the video feed. T plus 2 minute 30 seconds. Look at Florida in the background.
Stage
Contact
1,
ignition.
boost back startup.
Good engine ignition. The first stage is now going to use little nitrogen thrusters on the top of the stage to turn around because it's going to bang a Yui right now and boost back towards Florida.
Love.
What you're seeing right here is the propagation of the plumes from hitting each other. So because the first stage was facing this way, second stage was facing this way. First stage turned, second stage went, right? So the first stage is firing one of its engines and turning around. It's pulling that U-turn to get back towards Florida. This crazy effect right here that looks like water swirling around is the second stage and the first stage plumes interacting with each other. It's really, really cool. Really trippy stuff right there, but it looks awesome. No, you need the performance Nova. Okay, so the vehicle first stage is now 113 kilometers, 114, still going up, but losing speed, 2,400 kilometers an hour. Second stage is 126 kilometers in altitude, traveling at 7,300 kilometers an hour. We're T plus 3 minute 40 seconds into the CRS-29 flight. From these pictures, everything looks like it's working correctly.
You're just tuning in. You're watching a
It is an
live
RTLS,
webcast
yep.
for the 29th
Return to launch
commercial
site.
resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 81st mission for
Inconel, dark
2023
matter.
and the 6th and final Dragon flight to the International Space Station this year. We lifted off from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39A.
Why don't they launch during the day? Commando, good question. They don't launch during the day because, long story short, they have to launch when the ISS is near Florida. The ISS's orbit is kind of tilted. Like if you looked at Earth from the side, you looked at Earth's equator, the ISS's orbit is inclined. In rocket science, it's called orbital inclination. It's inclined by 50 degrees, meaning when the ISS crosses the equator, it makes about a 50-degree angle. It's 51.6 if you want to be really technical, right? So that makes it, because the Earth is spinning, right? And the ISS is in a tilted orbit, that Florida and the ISS's orbit only coincide every once in a while. Sometimes that point is at night. Sometimes it's at night. It's really where Florida crosses that orbital plane that the ISS is on. Yeah, good question, dude. Because if you waited like an hour from now, you wouldn't be anywhere near the ISS's orbit, and you'd need a rocket that's like the size of the rocket that we took people to the moon to get near it. Even waiting an hour, these trajectories are optimized down to the minute, or actually down to the second. It's down to the second, really, because you need a lot of fuel and a lot of oxidizer to get up there. And if you veered too much one way or the other, you wouldn't have enough fuel to get to the dang thing. That's how tight the design is on these vehicles.
To touchdown for landing today.
So we're 5 minutes 42 seconds into the flight. Second stage is 186 kilometers in altitude, traveling at 11,800. 27,000 is the number that we're looking for on the right. Meanwhile,
we are just about 15 seconds.
The first stage is way past its ballistic arc, the apex of its arc if you're talking baseball terms, or the apogee if you're talking scientist terms here. It's 64 kilometers in altitude, traveling at 4,300 kilometers an hour. Note that it is accelerating. What the first stage is going to do now is fire its engines here, because if you're accelerating back towards the ground, and accelerating back towards the ground is actually going to cause some re-entry heating. What Falcon 9 does to mitigate that is it doesn't have like tiles or a heat shield or anything particularly, but it uses the rocket exhaust as a thermal barrier to make sure that that doesn't happen too much. See the grid fin? The grid fin's on fire. That's plasma accumulating from ionized air from compression. Now, if you notice, we're getting lower back down into the atmosphere here. The altitude is going down, but your speed is dropping like a brick because Falcon 9's running into all that air. And when it runs back into all that air in the atmosphere, it compresses when it hits Falcon 9 and turns to plasma. It basically is going so fast it rips the air molecules that it hits apart. It's pretty metal when you think about it. I mean, the vehicle's also made out of metal too, so that's good. You can see the Space Coast right there. Grid fins will steer this thing down for its final landing trajectory here. The grid fins are hypersonic control surfaces. They're designed to control the vehicle when it's going faster than the speed of sound.
That includes Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions.
Okay, should see the landing burn. There it is.
There's that call out. The landing burn has begun. You can see it there.
There's the
on
landing
left-hand
pad.
Screen. Let's
Landing
watch
leg
Falcon
deploy.
9 touches down.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Oh.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
A little bit off the bullseye, but she made it.
And an awesome
Engine
sight
purging.
to see. As you can see, the Falcon 9 first stage that supported
Excellent.
today's mission landed for its second time and has previously supported the Crew 7 mission
Make it
in
look
August
so
earlier
easy.
this year. This marks the 238th
Stage 2
successful
internal
landing
guidance.
for
It's too cloudy, John. We're past 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Stage 2 has entered terminal guidance, which means it's using onboard accelerometers to figure out where its trajectory is going.
shut down.
It knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. True story. We should see second stage engine cutoff here at about 8:32, I think. It's a little bit longer than that. Stand by. Call for SECO and nominal orbit insertion. There's SECO. Look, little spraying from the nozzle right there.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Less than that, Mr. Steven, but yeah, Earth's rotation
Great news.
helps.
We have just had SECO and heard a confirmation of good nominal insertion.
Supersonic retro propulsion.
Plus 9 minutes into the mission, we are coming up on the last major task for Stage 2, commanding separation of Dragon.
Why is there no concerns about maximum dynamic pressure on the comeback, especially with empty tanks? Well, the vehicle's a lot lighter, PS5. Way less mass. Yeah, you can use the air to slow you down. The dynamic pressure is way, way more than it is on the way up. But you got to remember, there's not a nose cone hitting the air first. There's a rocket engine that's designed to hold an explosion. It can handle the higher dynamic pressure. It's not a problem. It's the heating that you got to worry about from the supersonic retro propulsion. So, Mr. Steven, you asked a question. What was that? That was a good question. If stage 1 has a burn time of about 2 minutes 30 seconds and boost back burn is 60 seconds, does that mean that landing the first stage cost about 30% of the stage 1 delta V? No. What you're not taking into account is that the first stage is a lot lighter. A 60-second burn with the stage with 10% of its fuel will have a lot more delta V than you think, right? Because your initial mass is way lower on that boost back burn because there's no second stage in Dragon attached. There's no fully fueled second stage in Dragon attached, right? And your first stage doesn't have a lot of fuel. So if you're thinking about the first stage burning by itself with like 10% fuel, you actually have a ton of delta V because you're not carrying all that extra second stage and Dragon on top, right? And all that extra fuel that you used to get up there in the first place. It's not 30%, it's more like 10% of its total fuel is for boost back. Probably less than that at this point, dude. The other thing that you got to take into account is Dragon's trajectory kind of looks like stage 1's trajectory goes up, and then it kind of looks like an infinity, and it loops back. See it right there? What Falcon 9 actually does, what that first stage does, is it doesn't point back at Florida and boost back down. What it actually does is it boosts up. The first stage points up at the sky when it does its boost back burn to push it on a higher trajectory and also negate its lateral velocity, the velocity going that way, right? Now, going up has a lot to do with it because Earth's going to rotate underneath that stage, right? So it rotates underneath it, and by the time the landing pad kind of rotates into position, the first stage comes back down right near it. Interesting, right? It doesn't so much boost back as it does basically stop. It's just getting rid of its what's called a forward velocity component, or a prograde velocity component. It negates the prograde velocity component. It can do that because it doesn't have a lot of fuel and oxidizer and no second stage attached. That was a lot of big words. Basically, it has the fuel to do it, and it's not as much fuel as you might think. The stage 2 have RCS. That's what you're seeing. Those snowflakes right there. Oh, there's Dragon separation.
And there you can see on your screen.
That's an onboard from inside of the Dragon.
Separated.
Cool. Here's a shot of some supplies or something. It's great. The shot of the food.
Now, if you're just now joining us, you're watching a live broadcast for the 29th commercial resupply
Never
mission
seen
to
an
the
onboard
International Space Station for
inside
NASA.
the uncrewed capsules
This is
before.
SpaceX's 81st mission this year and 6th and final Dragon flight to station for 2023.
Some space
We
crates,
lifted
dude.
off just about 12 and a half minutes ago from NASA Kennedy Space Center.
For all the gamers out there, if those crates inside of the capsule look like the crates that you see in Starfield, it's because the Starfield environment modelers copied NASA's crate design. Yeah, true story.
For the Dragon capsule.
Seriously, look at him. Let's go back. Go back and look.
Spacecraft has
Looks like Starfield, doesn't it? Looks like a Nova Galactic ship interior. It's because they copied them.
separated. So that will do it for me here in Hawthorne. So we are going to send it over to Chelsea in Houston to talk us through the nose cone.
Way
opening.
lighter,
Chelsea?
Panderific, yeah.
Thank you, Jesse, and welcome back to the International Space Station's Flight Control Room. I'm here with continued live coverage here in Mission Control Houston.
So what you can see behind Chelsea there is actually the fuel tanks on the spacecraft right there. Those are the fuel tanks and reaction control system interfaces for Dragon. I don't really know if they should be showing that, but meh, it's fine.
Of milestones. It separated from the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket and performed a number of automatic checkouts,
There's
doing
an
small
onboard
firings
looking
of the Draco thrusters. The next
inside of
major
Dragon's
milestone that we'll be
outboard
looking out
cargo
for here in
container
Mission Control is
called the
nose
trunk.
cone deploy. We already got confirmation that these latches, the things that are attaching the Dragon nose cone, are starting to come off. This is a process that's going to take a couple of minutes, and then that nose cone will begin to pop off. So let's talk a little bit about why we want this nose cone deployed. The nose cone protects the docking hardware that is needed to attach the cargo Dragon spacecraft to the space station for its 1-month stay, so nose cone deploy is a critical step in our timeline today. The nose cone also unveils 4 forward bulkhead thrusters, which Dragon will use for its major burn maneuvers to catch up with the space station. There will be a checkout of these engines just minutes after nose cone deploy. And the nose cone also protects Cargo Dragon's navigational sensors during ascent. These rendezvous and tracking elements help the spacecraft understand where it is and where it needs to go to reach the space station.
I was gonna say, isn't it the this thing? What do you mean it's gonna pop off? Unless you're just making a funny and I missed it. Hey Nova, thanks buddy.
The Eagle has landed.
So overall, the nose cone is there to protect the docking hardware, the forward bulkhead thrusters, and the rendezvous and tracking elements during launch.
That's right, dude.
And now the nose cone is in the process of opening up so the spacecraft can use those elements.
Well, show us then, lady.
Discovery.
I was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I hope
Two
it doesn't
sets of
pop
6
off,
latches
dude.
positioned
Damn.
around the docking ring, so 12 latches total need to be unlatched before the nose cone can swing open. This could take a couple of minutes to complete, and once they're open, then the nose cone will start to slowly swing open. This is a process that could take an additional 5 minutes, and we hope to get live views of this from the Cargo Dragon spacecraft later on.
Thanks for the bits, Tech. Appreciate it. Apatoxin with an 86-monther. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll go to nose cone deploy here, and then we'll jump back over to cities, dudes.
This mission is all about cargo. It's astronaut food, it's science experiments, it's hardware, all being delivered to the crew's doorstep in space.
Oh yeah,
They're in their sleep period right now, but they'll wake up to the news that their package is on its way.
Yeah, I think Charlie's in mission control over there.
NASA astronauts Laurel
totally
O'Hara
saw
and
the
Jasmine Mogbelli will monitor the spacecraft's arrival.
I just totally saw the most amazing thing. NASA just put that rocket right on the pad with SpaceX, and they just launched it right up into space. It was the most beautiful thing. The rocket just flew up into space like it didn't even care. It was like fire of 1,000 suns coming out the bottom. It was perfect. I like Charlie for what it's worth. I do it out of flattery.
Now, with the engines
I
firing
don't think
for
he
close
knows
to
who I
12
am, though,
minutes
so
in duration.
this is
Going
weird.
into Friday, the spacecraft will perform an additional 5 burns, all with the goal of fine-tuning Cargo Dragon's path to the International Space Station.
Seriously, that does look like
Moving on to early Saturday
moist,
here
doesn't
in
it?
Houston,
It kind of does look like
vicinity
him.
of the
That's
space
weird,
station.
man.
A team here in
Charlie-
Mission Control
Charlie
will
getting
work
in mission
closely
control.
with SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. They'll monitor as the spacecraft autonomously moves through the steps and checks required for docking.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Today's Cargo Dragon will be parked in the space
think so,
station's
Emily,
Node
yeah.
2 forward port. Node 2 is also known as the Harmony module, and it has been unoccupied since NASA's SpaceX Crew 6 crew departed the space station in September of this year.
27,000
The Crew 6 spacecraft was a
kilometers an hour
Crew
for
Dragon.
orbit, guys.
Its departure brought NASA astronauts Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg home, along with their crew members Sultan Al-Niyati and Andrei Fadjayev. But in its place will be today's Cargo Dragon when it docks on November 11th. NASA's Anna Schneider will be here in mission control with live coverage of docking Saturday morning.
Sweet.
But this spacecraft has a lot of milestones to hit before it arrives, including the opening of the nose cone. It's a step that the spacecraft is working on right now. We're waiting
NASA,
for confirmation
Shells. Gotta have some
that
decorum. There's the nose
all
cone
12
opening.
latches around the docking ring are open. And those rings are open, and the nose cone is starting to open up. So you're getting the view from the inside of the Cargo Dragon spacecraft. We're looking at the nose cone now. This is the very tip of the spacecraft, the tip of the rocket you were looking at on the launch pad. This is the nose cone opening up, and right underneath it, we'll get a view of the vacuum of space.
So when the nose cone pops off,
This nose cone will
exposes the
stay in
docking
this
port.
open position until the very end of its mission, closing once again just before the spacecraft re-enters Earth's atmosphere to provide some additional protection to that same hardware. This Cargo Dragon spacecraft is expected to return next month, undocking from the space station's Harmony module in early December,
I'm a
bringing
docking
back
port.
science experiments and other supplies back
95,
to
your
Earth.
mom's my docking port, son. Oh! Oh! Boom, 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 boom! Roasted.
Again, on your screen, you were seeing some motion moments ago. This is the nose cone of the Cargo Dragon spacecraft opening up. This maneuver was allowed by 12 latches that
Don't worry about it, G.
unhooked
We good.
themselves, one set of 6 at a time, allowing free motion of the nose cone that you see in motion here.
So, fun fact, the nose cone is covering up the docking port, but also to hold the nose cone in place, they use the docking port hooks. She keeps talking about the docking
This nose
port
cone
hooks.
deployment started just almost 7
The
minutes
hooks
ago.
hold the nose cone
and
in
now
place
the
on the
nose
way
cone is
up, and then
opening,
it
and
retracts
we're looking at the
because the
vacuum
docking
of
port
space from the
unlatches
point of
from
view
it.
of the Cargo Dragon spacecraft.
Why not 13? I wouldn't
Just
have
because
13
it's
of
no longer
anything
on
on
your
a
screen
rocket.
does not mean it's fully open. It has a couple of degrees more to go before we get confirmation of good nose cone deploy.
Okay.
As a reminder, Opening up this nose cone allows for access to the docking hardware underneath, critical for the Cargo Dragon spacecraft to reach to attach itself to the space station. It also unveils the forward bulkhead Draco thrusters and navigational sensors that Dragon will help to understand its position in space and also make it find its way to the space station. We've temporarily lost our live views, but so you're looking at a live view of Mission Control Houston as we continue to monitor the nose cone.
I'm looking at that dude's lunch on the counter
and
back
just
there.
like that, we just got confirmation that nose cone deployment is complete.
All right. Oh, hello.
This is a critical milestone for the Cargo Dragon spacecraft on its way to the International Space Station. Once again, we got confirmation that the Cargo Dragon nose cone has deployed. I do have a special guest joining me today. Joining me on the phone is Christy Depletion, Deputy Manager of the International Space Station Integration Office. Christy, are you with us?
I'm here. Thanks, Chelsea.
Christy, awesome launch today. I want to ask you a couple of questions about Dragon. So when it arrives, the crew schedule gets increasingly busy with science and research. Can you tell us some of the important work that they'll be doing?
Sure, that was a beautiful launch. Oh my gosh, and the booster landing was amazing. So the crew is very busy when it arrives. They're actually very busy even preparing for Dragon before it docks. The crew talks with payload developers to prepare for experiments they'll be doing. They also have a conference with our inventory and stowage officer to discuss the cargo being delivered and any changes to how they'll execute the unpacking and packing plan during the 30-day mission. The crew then does prepare for docking and ingress, and once Dragon is docked, the crew will perform their leak checks before they open the hatch. But yes, once Dragon arrives and the hatch is open, the crew gets right into work and we'll begin working on some of the experiments that were launched. One of these that I find interesting is from the European Space Agency called cerebral aging. It's a study of the effect of spaceflight and durability in space on cerebral organoids. An organoid is an artificially grown mass of cells or tissue that resembles an organ, so in this case, the brain. The overall goal of this experiment is to study the aging process in cerebral organoids derived from normal individuals and those patients with accelerated aging that may or may not be displaying hypersensitivity to UV radiation conditions, similar to what living organisms are exposed to during spaceflight. So this experiment will help us learn more about the effects of space conditions on our brains as we prepare for even longer duration space flights. And of course, the crew will be busy unpacking Dragon, and they are always excited to get the fresh food. As you mentioned earlier, we have some holiday-type food the crew can enjoy, like turkey, cranberry sauce, cheeses, and chocolate. So I think they'll enjoy that a lot.
She was talking about food up there, too, and I'm not sure where she was going with the brain
some
thing.
Science and some goodies. Sounds
awesome. Past Halloween already,
so
lady.
Looking ahead, 1 month from now, Dragon has completed its mission. Really cool. Can you share some of the hardware or research that Dragon is going to bring home back to Earth?
Yes, that's a great question. Our return missions are very important, just like launches are. They bring home research cargo as well as systems hardware that needs to be refurbished before we return it back to station. So the station is like our home and has equipment that needs repair and maintenance occasionally too. We are planning to return a few items on this flight for repair, including a resisted exercise device flywheel that provides the forces to simulate some 1G exercise for the crew. Another is a camera assembly.
Dumbbells. The capsule's bringing back down dumbbells. Yeah, that's what she said translated into English. Dumbbells.
Repair. So this control unit keeps an eye on the humidity and other environmental factors within the plant habitat. So if you've seen pictures of tomatoes or peppers recently from station, they may have been growing in that facility. As far as the research over the next month, the crew will complete many, many experiments, and then a lot of that research will come home for the scientists to have in a pretty rapid timeline. So that allows them to get their results pretty quickly.
No dark matter. No.
Christy, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So that was cool. Come on now. There we go. So, all right, cool. That's the CRS-29 coverage. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, dark matter, no. There's no... astronauts aren't prone to dementia, dude. They're prone to types of cancer, if anything. But actually, the vast majority of the Apollo astronauts have lived long and healthy lives. Actually, we lost one today. Frank Borman. He was on Apollo 8, which was the first time humans ever went outside of low Earth orbit in December of 1968. We lost him today. I'd say he lived pretty long after Apollo, 50 plus years after the mission. So, yeah, if anything, they're more prone to cancer because there's a lot more. You don't have Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere in the way to stop other forms of radiation. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean we don't have ways to do it. And aluminum can bounce the radiation pretty well, as seen from the Apollo astronauts. But yeah, we did lose Frank Borman today, which sucks. That sucks. And T.K. Mattingly, another Apollo astronaut, for like a week ago. They're starting to drop. I hope one of them. I hope one of them's still around. So at least one of them can see that we went back to the moon. It only took us 50 friggin' years, but it's not good. But hey, it's okay. You can bounce my aluminum any day. Bull crap, you can bounce my aluminum. So, yeah, respect to him. Yep, Buzz Aldrin's still around. Charlie Duke's still around. Those are two pretty good ones. Also led the commission for the Apollo 1 fire. That's right. Yep. Anyway, let's get back to cities, shall we? We have a train line to build. We got a frickin' train line to build. That's what we got to do.